Hey everyone, Riley and Matthew here again at the Concealed Carry Expo, live from the show floor, and boy, lot of activity still going on. Less than an hour left of the show for tonight, and of course we'll see you again tomorrow. But we are now privileged to sit down with Mr. Joe Kalil, remarkable man in the industry, lots of great ideas and knowledge and experience where it comes to countering an active shooter threat. Let me just introduce Joe a little bit for you. He came prepared, which is really cool of him. So, Joe is a constitutional Christian serving as an elected Boone County, Kentucky constable. He's a commercial airline captain flying B-737s for a major airline, serves as a federal law enforcement officer and law enforcement firearms instructor. Joe is also a former Army officer and pilot who served in multiple combat zones. He has been inducted into the new Kentucky Veterans Hall of Fame, has received the Presidential Volunteer Service Award, and is a Kentucky Colonel, which is, that's cool. Like they actually exist. He is also a certified flight instructor and possesses master's, bachelor's, and associate's degrees. Joe is a USCCA and NRA training counselor and instructor in multiple disciplines. He owned a firearms training school for 11 years where he taught approximately 3,000 students a multitude of courses, from concealed carry to advanced tactical handgun and rifle courses. He is a master shooter in IDPA. Joe, partnering with multiple sheriffs, designed the school POST program using the Armed Pilot program as a model. POST stands for Protecting Our Students and Teachers. Joe has studied under two of the most recognized experts in school safety, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman and Phil Chalmers. He has taught lockdown procedures, active shooter and bomb threat procedures to schools and businesses, as well as trained private and church security teams. That's a mouthful, wow. Joe. And so here he is. We're pleased to sit down with you, Joe. And anything you want to add to that?
No, I think what's important to add to the background is that on 9/11, they used the same type of airplanes that I was flying at the time, two 757s and two 767s as weapons, and I had a 7-day-old daughter. And wow. It was personal. And so within a week of 9/11, I actually joined an organization to try to get pilots armed.
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, if the hijacker's objective is to make it into the cockpit and take over my airplane and use it as a weapon, why don't we protect the flight deck?
Yep.
And so I think that's an important piece of motivation. And so I've been involved in this type of push on a national scale, and now we're trying to push on a state scale to actually protect our schools from and mitigate the active killer threat. That's the key.
Yeah. It's a fantastic program that we now have as far as training and arming some of our pilots out there in the skies, which I'm thankful for. I've certainly, when we're expected to disarm ourselves, go through security and all that stuff, we're really relying on you not only to fly the plane safely, but also be the last line of defense in the event that somehow somebody does make it onto the plane and poses a threat.
And the interesting thing there is there's a layered defense. You have the screening, and then you have federal air marshals, and then you have armed pilots. Well, that causes that layered protection, and that's the same thing we want to do in the schools. Right. We want school resource officers to remain, and we want to supplement them with a program like the POST program.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the POST program. What does that look like in kind of an easy-to-understand a summary of sorts for our viewers?
It's pretty straightforward. Basically, all we're looking for, it's important that it's only volunteers. We're looking for a 5% participation rate. So we're talking 1 in 20 school employees. Also, we're talking anybody that works at the school. A lot of people saying armed teachers. Well, it's school employees. There's a lot of employees at the school besides teachers.
Right.
These individuals, after they volunteer, would fill out an application. Then they'd go through an interview with school employees, staff or administration, with the sheriff or police, chief of police, and the school resource officer, if there's one at the school that they'd be working at. Then after that, they would go through a background check, possibly mental screening checks. Then they would actually go through a 6.5-day training program, 58.5 hours of training, with only one goal: how to mitigate the active killer threat in our schools. It's a simple focus. It's not going to be distracted by miscellaneous things. Yeah. Then they would also be requalified with their firearms every 6 months. And just before the school year starts every year in the summer, we would put them through a 1-day refresher course. Now, this program is not a take-it-or-leave-it program. It's actually a program that we want the schools to adopt and modify to their liking, and we'll help them. So it's not a either take this or leave it. So we want them to take possession and ownership of it.
Yeah.
But here's 3 reasons why we think the program will be successful. Number 1 is deterrence. When you have a school like we do now, most schools, all they have is a no-gun sign. Let's talk about that just for a second.
Yeah.
That no-gun sign portrays a very direct message to the gunman that this school is unprotected and that this can be a free-for-all until police respond. Well, when seconds count, the police are minutes away, and it's not their fault. They can't be everywhere at the same time. In Kentucky here, the average is 30% or less coverage of school resource officers in our schools. So we don't even have SROs in every school.
Yeah.
So we want to take down the no gun sign and put up a sign that says school employees on this campus are trained and armed. We think that just by saying the program exists and putting the sign up would deter the attack from occurring in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is immediate armed response. Again, when the police are minutes away and seconds count, the school employee who's armed, or the ones that are not armed for that matter, when the shot takes place outside of their workplace, they're the first responder, like it or not.
Yeah.
And now all we're asking for is to put 5% through a screening and training process to arm them. And so now the response to the gunman is going to be faster. And guess what the statistics are on that? Active killers in a normal situation, 40% of times actually take their own life at the first response of an armed response. Yeah. In schools, it's 70%. It's even higher. So we need that reaction to the school shooter to be faster. So A, it was deterrence. B, it was immediate armed response. And number 3 is the thoroughness of training. So we have more training in this program than armed pilots receive. And again, the whole focus is on simply mitigating the active killer threat.
But I also think that amount of training, 58 and a half hours of training, is in the refresher course each year. I think that's fantastic because that's almost more important for a lot of folks than just the initial training. It's just like, continuing. I mean, we all know shooters that were trained really well to high standards many years ago, but haven't done anything since. And we know what they shoot like sometimes. But I like that. What you set as sort of a standard is actually, I think, very achievable and reasonable. We just talked on the podcast recently about the law passed in Florida, where they've approved the arming of teachers. Mm-hmm. But I think when you total it all up, it's over 150 hours of training that's required. And I kind of our takeaway was from that, Joe, was like that's unattainable for most teachers. Well, unless a school is literally saying we'll pay you to go, for however many weeks.
And doesn't that account to, aren't they talking 3 weeks of training? I think that's
that's basically 3 weeks. Yeah.
So, this is a good point to bring up the Ohio FASTER program. So Ohio, the Buckeye Farms Association, has a program where they have armed school employees. It's called the FASTER program, and people can go to fastersaveslives.org to research that.
Yep.
And they have trained 1,300 school employees that come from 76 out of 88 of the counties in Ohio. And they have at least 1,300 school employees on the waiting list. In other words, there's a true desire for people to do this.
Yep.
And so they're only doing 3 days of training, and ours is over 6 days of training. Now, I'm not saying our program is better because I attended the FASTER program, and it's actually a fantastic training course. Actually, as a constitutionalist, I think if we just took away the gun-free zones and actually just allowed any law-abiding citizen to be armed, you would actually solve the problem. But if I'm having hard enough trouble getting 6.5 days of training into the schools, it's a non-starter with some of these school systems. So.
It's so interesting because we have those conversations, right? And I love pointing out to people. In fact, I just attended maybe a month ago now. In our school district back in Colorado where I live, we had this big school security and safety meeting, bringing in parents, bringing in teachers, administrators, local law enforcement to, it was obviously just after Parkland. And so just talking about all of that and what it meant for our community, for our schools, what we were going to do about it. There's still some things in the works. But, I was in a conversation following that meeting with someone that was like, I just can't see us arming teachers or administrators. Like that, it's not the place for it. We want to focus on being teachers and administrators. And I thought, it's interesting because I said, you realize we have a perfect case study for this concept. Speaking to constitutionalism, right? And it's the state of Utah for 15 years, right?
They've allowed anybody with a concealed carry permit to carry in their schools, and guess how many incidents they've had? It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question based along those lines. Is obviously you talk to people a lot about this, and from a lot of the viewers that are watching this are probably on our side, like agree with us, like, hey, arming teachers, not forcing them to be armed, is a good idea. But outside of this convention hall, there's probably there are a lot of people out there that immediately jump to the conclusion, okay, we can't arm teachers. They have too much on their plate, or it's going to be too dangerous. Do you find that when you sit down and explain this logically to people like that are averse to it, that it switches more minds than not? I mean, I'm sure there's still people that are just against it.
Well, we have some people that emotionally look at the firearm issue and they just cannot get over that emotional hurdle. But here's where I like to start with people. You know, we have to face reality and look at our society as a big picture. We use firearms to protect our president, our congressmen, our celebrities, our jewelry stores, our shops, our businesses, our stadiums. For goodness sakes, do we put two armed persons into an $80,000 to $100,000 armored vehicle to protect our insured money? But our kids, which is our most precious gift from God, gets a no-gun sign? It blows me away. And sometimes I tell those people, when you go to Walmart, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20% of the people around you are carrying guns. You don't know about it.
Yeah.
But here's the beautiful thing about our program, by the way, because of the concealed carry aspect of it, is that if you walked into the school tomorrow after implementation of the school post program, you would not know anything other than the sign on the door. In other words, the school employees would be carrying concealed firearms. You wouldn't know how many there are, and you wouldn't know where they're located. That's huge. In the Art of War book, surprise factor is a huge thing.
Absolutely.
So it's important.
Well, and speaking to, not to make too much of a deal out of Utah, but I love the fact that their statute prevents school districts and administrators from even asking which of their teachers carries concealed.
Right.
So, I mean, because that obviously keeps the surprise factor completely a true surprise.
Right.
So, can you walk us through, so what does the post-program training look like? Like, walk me through, if I was going to go through this program, what are some of the key components?
Well, it's interesting is that we have 5 core days of training, but we have 1 day, enhanced day of training before the 5 days of core training. Why do we separate this? Because we want the participants to show up to the shooting portion of the course prepared with the right type of holster, right type of firearm, right type of mindset and everything. So we have a 10.5-hour training day where we talk about mindset, the program details, how sensitive it is that they keep their identities confidential. We talk about handgun nomenclature and function, the different ways to conceal it on your body, all the things you would expect to kind of warm them up to the topic. That night, we also go through 3 or 4 hours of medical trauma training to give them that training. Then a week or two later, they come to the 5 days of training, and they get 2 half days of classroom, and the rest of it's all on the range. 1,200 rounds of ammunition is what they're going to fire. And we also have a FAT simulator that we have access to, at least in Northern Kentucky, and we're going to put them into the schools with either simunitions or airsoft and actually put them through scenarios in the classroom, in the hallway, in the assembly area, in the lunchroom, in the front office, shoot and no-shoot scenarios with high stress to try to inoculate them and get them used to what they should do and should not do. So it's a really involved program.
That's awesome.
It's an hour and a half more training than the pilots receive. I mean, it's pretty exciting when you actually look at the syllabus and how thorough. The other thing I want to mention is school resource officers real quick. This program is not intended to replace any school resource officer. It's just to supplement them.
Right.
But we have to admit something. School resource officers, they go to lunch, they go on vacation, they attend training, they do home visits. They actually could be on the other side of campus, or God forbid, they could be targeted first because they're in uniform. So this program, again, forming that layered defense along with the SRO is invaluable. And that's how you protect your schools.
That's right.
And so this is doable. These shootings are preventable.
Absolutely. Absolutely they are.
How often do you see teachers that go through that first phase of training and then say, hold on, this is more than I can handle? Do you get a sense of that, or those people pretty much? Yes,
and hopefully the interview process and a background check and talking to them ahead of time and actually sending an email describing the program will help them decide if they want to participate or not. But it is important to note that while they're going through the training, they can be eliminated. They can be eliminated on the last day.
I think that's important.
So at any time for either mindset issues, and this is really your weapon anyway.
Yeah.
The firearm's a tool. Your mind is your weapon. And if they don't have the right mindset, they should not be a participant in the program.
Absolutely.
And they can be eliminated from the program at any point with no ramifications to their job either, and that's important to note.
Yeah.
They volunteered for this, so there can be no negative ramifications there. So,
Good
and it's
stuff.
really a cost-effective program too. The costs are minimal. Ohio uses a 503c nonprofit and actually pays for the training, pays for the hotel, gives a huge emergency medical kit to every participating school, and every teacher gets a individual first aid kit.
Yeah.
Because you know as well as I do, when the shooting's over, what kills then?
Yeah.
Bleeding. And so we got to stop the bleeding immediately. So our training would potentially equip them with the same equipment and give them the training to actually, stop bleeding.
You're not when you're that armed teacher or administrator or staff member. You're not only the first line of defense, the first responder for the shooting aspect, but also the aftermath. So.
That's right.
Man, this is fantastic stuff, and unfortunately, I think we're out of time at this point. I would encourage everyone watching to go check out the what's the official name? The School Post program.
Let me give the website. It is www.post, POSTKY for Kentucky.org. Now, I say Kentucky's in there, but I want to emphasize to everybody that there's 36 states that allow something like this to be implemented now. So the key is just take the program. It's no permission needed. Take the program, run with it, use it as a beginning portion to design your own program, and approach your school boards and actually see if they will implement. Let's protect our kids.
I love that. And good work, brother. We appreciate you. Thanks for coming on with us today at the Concealed Carry Expo.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
God bless, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.